sorry for the delay. We were in the sport banquet presentation, and we had a lot of great accomplishments between the robotics team, wrestling, basketball, cheerleading, and swimming. And it was, yeah, so welcome to Norwalk City School Board regular meeting Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 at 6:44 p.m. I would like to start off with prayer. We could bow our heads. God, ignite our passion for Jesus, that through our power of Him and the Holy Spirit, we can be committed to His mission. I just ask for you to give us guidance and words to use in support of our students, our staff, our community, and to guide us and bless us during this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Call to order, please.
Mrs. Crawford? Here. Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Norris?
Here.
Mr. Ritzenthaler?
Here.
Mrs. Wick?
Here. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I have a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Ritzenthaler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Mrs. Wick?
Yes. Public participation. Each person who wishes to address the board will be asked to give his or her name and address. Remarks should be limited to 3 minutes in length. If after everyone who wishes to do so has had the opportunity to speak, additional comments can be made up to a total allotted time of 30 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jeff Bertram. I live at 10 Wedgewood Drive here in Norwalk, Ohio. Graduated Norwalk High School many, many years ago. I rise to address the board about the resolution that you're considering adopting and voting on this evening regarding House Bill 1. I just spoke to our state representative, Richard Stein, a few moments ago on the phone about House Bill 1. Just a little bit of background. That bill was given by the current leadership, Speaker Stevens, to Representative Myers, who is a freshman, or Martin, I'm sorry, who is a freshman state representative. The purpose of the bill was to foster discussion at the state level about the fair tax and how that fair tax would impact taxpayers, not just here in Norwalk, but statewide as well. The representative understands the concerns that the school board has. When I did the math, $1.2 billion divided by 611 school districts was almost $2 million per municipality. However, the state has said in the summary of the bill that they are going to make school boards, municipalities whole in the initial inception of House Bill 1. And so currently the way that it's written, you guys all know how legislation goes through like a sausage making process. It probably will not look anything like it looks right now if it passes at all. It will be probably watered down considerably. And I just wanted to pass those remarks on behalf of Representative Stein. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Educational spotlight.
Yes, today we have our team from Maplehurst, so Mr. Moore, Mrs. Smith, and we have students here, which is always a great way to start a board meeting. So we need to do this more often. There's a lot of great things happening in our district, so we just had that next door, and clearly we get to move to this space and see more of it. So, Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bully. And we're happy to wait because it's a good thing that's going on next door, for sure. So, let me go back one, I think, yeah. So at Maplehurst Elementary, you just saw our second slide. We are part of the elementary level. We are part of the Leader in Me program that was dovetailed off of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Individuals. So the elementary portion of that, or the school portion of that, is what is the Leader in Me program that we have. So in our preschool through grade 1 at Maplehurst, we utilize the program, and it is part of a slogan we have at Maplehurst Elementary is the journey begins there. It really does start with our kids all the way up through the times they come up to this building. So with that being said, what we have is a foundational component that the Leader in Me has. And what we have is our leadership team is comprised of 5 teacher teams. So the first year we had teacher teams, and they were an academic team, which was just added this year. We also had the shared leadership team, the environment team, and our Teach Students to Lead team. So those teams were made by teachers, comprised of teachers for the first year that we started this, with the understanding of it being that as every year you grow, you, as a leader, you take responsibility for your role. And it's also, as that last one is, or the third one there, third one from the bottom, shared leadership. Part of a role of a leader is to recognize that you can't do everything or be everywhere, and you need to rely upon each other to get good, to make good things happen. So part of our team, what we did last year was getting ready for this year. We said we needed to involve our kids more often in what's going on in our school. So we had some discussion, and in our Lighthouse team, that our leadership team of teachers that are each on one of these teams came up with some ideas. And Rosalie, you want to come on up, Rosalie? I'll have you come on up and recognize. Rosalie Smith is one of our preschool teachers, and also is like the director of our preschool, and she's one of our leaders in our Lighthouse team. So we talked, even after our last meeting, there were 2 or 3 teachers that we just sat around and talked about leadership and where we want to go for next year. And she had a great idea and about recycling and involving other people in our building and getting our kids to understand what it is to be a leader and how it is to be part of a group. So what we did was we came up with a leadership team, and our leadership team that we comprise of our students that are right here, and I'm going to introduce them at the end also in the slide presentation. So these are our leaders in our school are comprised of these students: Milo Alexander, Maisie Davis, Hensley Goodright, Sophie Kipp, Eli Knoll, Riley McIntyre, Jackson Negro, Leo Rinnenberger, and Lily Schumann. Now, all of them aren't here tonight. There's a couple that are they're sick and weren't able to be here. 2 of them were. So we will present them an award here afterwards. But I wanted to go over a little bit of what they've done this past year in becoming leaders at our school. So our school leadership role, where we spoke about having greeters at each of our doors every day. So we have 2 entrance doors that come in. So students in the classrooms are assigned to have 2 teachers assign 2 kids at the entrances of our school. They greet the students as they come in each day, welcome them to school, and then they go into the gym before school starts and wait for the teachers to pick them up. Then we also branched out, and Rosalie had a great idea of recycling on Wednesday. So every Wednesday, and you'll see as we go through the slide presentation, it won't be too long. Every Wednesday, Rosalie, you'll see the bags that are collected in the foyer. She collects them all. And I've got an old pickup truck that's really old, and it's falling apart, but it still has a good bed in the back. And I told her, anytime you want to throw those in there, we can recycle them. But she fits them all in the back of her car and takes care of them on Wednesdays. We also she came up with another great idea of selling ice cream. We sell ice cream on Fridays to our students for 50 cents. And Daniel's over there raising his thumb. So she said, hey, what if we involved another community group in our selling of ice cream? So she came up with that idea, and I'll let her talk briefly about that and who we utilized in that program.
So last spring, at the end of our year, we were meeting as a Lighthouse team and trying to figure out how we could get the community more involved in roles at our school. And so Lindsay Hyman and I were talking, and we reached out to the board of DD, to Julie Tyler and Jamie Perry, and said, hey, do you have any adults who would like to come help at school? And that's kind of how it all started. So some of them are here tonight, and we will introduce them when we're done with the slideshow.
Sure. So here is, as Rosalie was talking about, we have the kids selling ice cream. And the two pictures on the right of the kids selling ice cream. I'm moving the mouse here with my hand. And we have Jackson Negro is selling ice cream. Rosalie, want to explain a little bit of what he's doing?
So Jackson, he takes the money. So if they need change back, he's learning how to do that. He's very good at that. He enjoys doing the money part of it. And his assistant that day is Daniel, who likes to give out the ice cream. So it's a good combination between the two of them.
Yeah. So on top of that, after we did that, we expanded upon collecting the recycling. So our mission here is to reduce the amount of paper placed in our landfills through educating our students each year. And in doing that, what we've done is, as I mentioned on Wednesday, students go around and, hey, Jackson, come on down, buddy. Why don't you explain to everybody what's going on? Come on over here. Bring your paper with you.
In the city of Norwalk, you can see the blue bins. They donated the bins for us to use for this program, so we appreciated them donating those as well.
Good evening. My name is Jackson Negro. I am a fourth grade student at Maplehurst Elementary School. I am in Mrs. Nutter's class. Our team is in charge of the recycling program at our school. We recycle paper from the classrooms each Wednesday. Mrs. Smith and the adult leaders from Christie Lane help us collect paper each week. We empty the blue bins into the large bags, and Mrs. Smith and the adults take it to the recycling center.
Okay, so here the kids are. They're emptying bags. They go around each of the rooms, and those blue bins that Rosalie was talking about are there. Because our custodians were, Gloria Huntley just retired last year, and she was like, Ken, especially when we have art, there's a lot of paper that gets just thrown away. And so we talked about this last year, and then Rosalie brought it up again and said, what if we have a group do this? It's fantastic. And it's great to teach the kids that you want to recycle and reuse the papers. So part of this program, what we want to do is last week I reached out to Republic Recycling, and they have a recycling center over in Oberlin. They call it Norwalk, and they do a fantastic job. Norwalk does, Joe. They collect tomorrow morning, they're going to collect my recycling, but they take it and they take it to the recycling center in Norwalk. They load it to a truck, take it to the landfill south of Norwalk, and then they put it in another big truck and take it to Mansfield to get recycled. So I didn't realize that. So in talking to him, he said, hey, Ken, you want to get the best bang out of your buck, go to Oberlin. They have a fantastic recycling. So I called them up, and they're going to get back to me this week. And what I'd like to do, the vision I'd like to do is have our kids go on a trip before the end of the year, and then the end of May, do a presentation like this to our school to say, this is where our paper is going, our recycling is going. This is what we're doing to make the earth a better place to live. So that is, in essence, where our recycling is going. There's one of the bags that Q is loading up. So those are bags that get dragged out every week on Wednesday to Rosalie's car. So it is, at Maplehurst Elementary, it is where the journey begins. So what I'd like to do is take a chance to recognize our students, our adult volunteers, with some certificates of appreciation that they will receive from us, and call them up. Here's my paper. So we'll start with the kids. Could we have Milo Alexander? He was out today. Yeah. Maisie Davis. And we'll wait till they all get up and line up, and we'll give them a round of applause. Ansley Goodright. Sophie Kip. Eli Noel.
Yes.
Riley McIntyre, Jackson Negro, Leo Rindenberger, who's not here, and Lily. Yeah, Lily Schumann, come on down.
You can speak it too.
So if we could give them a round of applause. The next person we would like to introduce our adults.
Okay, first I'd like to introduce their leaders. So if Julie Tyler and Jamie Perry could come up. Those are the two ladies that I've worked with to get this program going. And hopefully we'll continue in the future and we can add more roles for them to do. So first I'll introduce Jeremy Stone. So Jeremy comes every other Friday and he helps us sell ice cream. Come on up, Jeremy. We have a certificate for you.
I go around or?
You can start down here.
Shake hands.
You can start there when it's back.
Okay, so Jeremy likes to help on Fridays with the ice cream. He does a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good name.
And Quentin O'Brien. Quentin comes on Wednesdays with Cassidy, who's not here tonight, but Quentin helps do the greeting in the morning at the door. And then he comes around and he helps get the recycling. He's got quite the personality. He likes to give me a hard time. I guess somebody has it, so that's who it is. So thanks, Q. And then our other adult here tonight is Daniel Ingram. Daniel also helps sell ice cream every other Friday with us. Daniel's great at making sure the students get to a level 0 when they get too loud in the cafeteria. So we appreciate them and what they're doing for us, and hopefully we can continue this partnership and like I said, add more roles in the future.
And I'll have one more thing before we leave. This lady has been very instrumental in everything we've tried to accomplish. She is a true leader who steps back behind the curtain and doesn't look for a lot of recognition. Rosalie has been a great right hand for our school, for me. Throughout the years, I've had no problem relying upon her to set this up, making sure everything's covered. She has done a fantastic job. So I would like to recognize her, to present her with this outstanding achievement for school leadership at Maplehurst Elementary, and on this March 14th, 2023. So you guys get a certificate, and so does Mrs. Smith. Okay. Quick, guys, get up want the adults in the class behind her?
I don't care, whatever you want to do.
You guys, come on up. Ladies? No, you're fine, really. You're fine. Daniel, come on over. Bill, come on up here. Yep, just stand right in the back here. Ladies, come on up. Just might as well. Joe's taking a picture.
How you doing? Good.
One hand, Rosalie. We need one for the yearbook. Q, you got your certificate? Okay, get your certificate, kid. Oh, boy. Good job. You guys do a great job.
Okay. Really good sight.
Say leadership on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Leadership.
You betcha.
You all set? Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Maplehurst. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate everything you do.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You got your phone.
Okay. Special presentation.
Yes, we are fortunate to have Dr. Lonnie Rivera with us. Lonnie currently works with North Point. He has been a superintendent in the Toledo area, has been at the highest levels, interim superintendent of ODE. So I think you don't mind me saying that, correct?
No, as long as you don't hold it.
Dr. Rivera trained our 6 through 12 admin team and teachers in threat assessment. He is the best person to talk about this. It's required by our schools. So very fortunate to have him because he is the trainer who taught all of the admin and the teacher team counselors of Norwalk City School District. So thanks for coming tonight.
Well, thank you very much. I do have a copy for each of the board members. And then when you're finished, if you want to give it to the admin to use, or if you'd like to use, you can. Again, well, thank you for allowing me to be here today. The governor really, in the last year or so, school safety has been a really big emphasis for schools. So House Bill 123 required that school districts have training. And so if we can, how do I do this? All right, so if you can see this kind of, so this is work that's brought out by Dewey Cornell, and this guy is pretty much anytime there was a high-profile school shooting, this was the guy that they sent in. And what he was finding out is that we do a lot of, say there's lockdown drills that we do with the schools, so we're doing that once something happens, but he was saying, listen, we need to do more to make sure that this doesn't, how do we prevent these things from taking place? So Dewey Cornell doing some research, the book you have in front of you, is his life's work. The state of Ohio found that this is probably the exemplar of what is being used for threat assessment training. It's really good, easy to use. If you look in the appendix area, you'll see that's where all the forms are that districts are starting to use towards the back of the book. And in particular, there's a decision tree that I'll show you so districts can know what to look for. So my next slide, typically this training, there's I think 246 slides or something like that. So I did pare it down. So we're not going to be here for 3 hours. But this is typically what we had to do. North Point put on 8 of these trainings from across the state, and I think we did a pretty good job with it. But we talked about what a threat assessment is, how safe are our schools, what this model is, and the evidence for it working. What I would like to say is that in our 24-hour news cycles, when something happens in a school, that's all anybody hears. And sometimes there's this, our community thinks that our schools are not very safe places. And there's some data I'm going to show you to kind of show you overall, these are still the safest places that kids can be. So what is threat assessment? Behavioral threat assessment is a problem-solving approach to violence prevention. Normally what happens is schools are very keyed into when a student does something that's inappropriate, we discipline. And rightly so, we need to. But what are we doing on the front end to prevent? And one of the most fascinating pieces of this training is that we go over about 7 or 8 different high-profile shootings, and every one of those individuals, there were breadcrumbs they gave along the way, and there were things that could have been done at different stages to probably stop a lot of this. And so, how do we make sure that we're doing what schools need to do to prevent these things from happening? Which means that schools need to be trained. Okay, so We identify first, and through this training, district leadership teams understand what to look for. Family and friends can actually do it. In some cases, somebody will call the school and say, hey, we're concerned about a situation. This kid or this issue may be a violent situation happening. We need to make sure that we're doing something for it. The evaluation of a threat, that's where this book comes in place. There are decision trees there that you can go through as a team. So the way it's set up is there's at least 3 people on these teams, at least 3, because we don't want people to go it alone. So a principal shouldn't have to do this work by themselves. They should have other folks that have been trained. What we want to make sure is that sometimes situations come up that one person may be in agreement and 2 others may say, hey, listen, we think there's more here. We need to make sure that we turn over every rock. So we show teachers and administrators how to do this, and then intervention. What we're looking for is that when kids do things that are inappropriate, yes, we need to discipline, but are we documenting what we're doing to give these kids needed help that they need? Okay? So prevention means keeping something from happening. And we look at some of these pictures. This was one from a while ago when they were moving students out of Sandy Hook. And what we've done since then is that kids understand what lockdowns are. But again, it can't just stop at the lockdown. If we're at that point, we've missed something. Okay. So they seem unpredictable, shootings do, but prevention does not require prediction. So this is Dewey Cornell speaking to Congress and telling people, listen, we can do some things to short circuit this from happening. So what I can tell you is that the research is showing, and this is something I believe in my heart, is that your culture in your schools, it is king to everything. When these kids have a trusted adult to lean in on, a lot of this stuff doesn't happen. The one thing they found with a number of these shootings, or all these shootings, they didn't have connections with adults in the buildings. So that's something I would say is really cue into how your culture is in your buildings with your district. I'm telling you, culture is king to everything. So threat assessment is a problem-solving approach. We want to make sure that we're using information on how to help kids. And when should a threat assessment be conducted? So you guys are in the business of educating. You kindergartners, you're sweet. You guys have, well, it's hard to follow a group of kids like that. But kindergartners will say things at times. They'll say things in anger. On the sports field, people will say things that are heated. But we need to find out and be able to ascertain, does this kid really be a threat or not? So direct or indirect statements of intent need to be looked into. Concerning behavior such as planning or preparing to harm someone, that's what all this is about. Now, for schools that are doing discipline, you don't have to use this process for everything that happens in school, and they've been trained on that. But when there is things that don't sit right, if there are things that have happened in the neighborhood and they're spilling into the schools, then we need to be able to make sure that we can safely say that we've looked into history, we've done the research we needed to, we've asked kids and parents, we've interviewed folks, and we've asked the right questions. So when you look through it, if you have a chance to look through that book later on, you'll see that there are a series of questions to ask. And sometimes as an administrator, I was a principal for a number of years, you get tired, you get busy, and sometimes you don't ask all the right questions. And this is making sure that you're asking in a very thorough manner what is actually happening with kids and making sure we don't miss anything. So how safe are our schools? This is there's a graph here. I hate to have to turn around all the time, but in 2021, there were 138 incidents of gunfire at on school grounds, resulting in 28 deaths or 80 injuries. So for every school victim that happened at school, there were 568 that happened on the outside. So there's this idea that schools are very dangerous places, but even out of this data to let you know that many schools have parks that are associated with the school, and after hours gang activity happens there. So they don't disaggregate the data to say that this is happening inside the schools during the day. So that number is very low. So I want to make sure that people know that, because we want to be able to tell people that, listen, we're doing a good job. We have added security measures. Our staff has been trained. We have school resource officers employed. You have, all that stuff going on to make sure your kids are safe. So they are safer than what the public perceives, but then you'll see the most dangerous place, according to statistics, is in the residence, in their house. So that's where they're finding that most of the danger or homicides happen. And then on the street, sidewalk, parking lot, you can see all that going down, and down to K-12 schools. where that number is relatively low. So just wanted to make sure you know that, because again, when something happens, it's on the news cycle and everybody sees it and hears it. And, God forbid, we don't want that to happen in our schools. So based on that data, about every 6,000 years, a school can plan to have something happen at their schools, because there's about 125,000 schools across the country. Okay. I bring this up here too, why this is so important, is that when a shooting happens or violence in schools happen, the first thing we do is talk about school suspension and expulsion. And then we also spend money on school fortifications, putting the film on the doors, getting additional staff and personnel, which is all good. But what this focuses in on, again, as I said earlier, is that how do we make sure that if we have a child in our office for this type of issue, what are we documenting that we're doing for them? Are we giving those services, mental health? Are we making sure that it's being looked into? Because every scenario of shootings that happen in this country where kids that were going on the wrong step left a lot of crumbs. But again, as administration, sometimes we want to make sure this kid's not in school. We don't do anything beyond just the suspension. Okay? So it's not designed to determine whether a student has made a threat, but if he poses a threat. So it really requires our teachers to look at this. Now, some of you may have a zero tolerance policy. A lot of districts are moving away from that, because zero tolerance says if a kid does A, then this happens. And a lot of times you'll find there's a lot of gray areas. So this is what threat assessment paves the way for, is that we can look at each individual infraction, I guess, on a case-by-case basis. Okay. So this is a multidisciplinary team. So most districts would send their principal, their counselor, a social worker, somebody that at a moment's notice can look into a situation. So you don't have to pull a classroom teacher out of the class. You have people that are able to kind of look at these situations. And we ask that 2 or 3 people be involved in this. And I believe in your area, you have at least 3 in each of the buildings for training. So we don't want people to go alone. This is kind of a diagram. It's usually a principal, assistant principal, school resource officer. If you have one, I don't know if you have one in every building or not, or you have one. Okay. Some districts have those folks, and those school resource officers are on board to help advise, because some of these things can get tricky. If there's a police officer involved, they can tend to go into the homes and ask questions that maybe we can't. But either way, making sure that your local police department is on board with you. And we've trained a lot of police in this process. These are the forms, and what I love about this is all these forms are free online. So you can produce them. They can become part of your standard operating procedure. There's a program called Navigate 360, which is a computerized program where when kids move between your buildings, it's on a single login, so you don't lose any of this information. So that's something that, as a district, you'll have to talk about later. It has a cost. So some of this, those programs, they're not for free. So this is really what is very important. What I like about it is that there's a decision tree that administrators and teams can use. And the very first thing they do is they evaluate the threat, and they break it into two different types, or two different types of threats: transient threats or substantive threats. Now, just for common knowledge, a transient threat is kids are playing a game out in the soccer field. Somebody trips on them and they say, "I'm going to kill you," or something like that. That is a heat of the moment usually issue. It's not something that is like, man, this kid really means it. Those are more like transient threats. A substantive threat is that there is something that's been going on for a while with these 2 kids, and now a kid makes a threat either on Facebook, at home, in school, and you know that it's happened, and you think this kid might carry out to do some physical harm. That's a substantive threat. And then the very serious substantive threats are only about 1 to 3% of all threats in a school. So most of everything that comes to your door is going to be a transient threat. It's going to be something that just kids are going to be like, "Hey, I shouldn't have said something. I made a mistake." Because we've all said things in maybe passion moments where, I probably shouldn't have said that. So transient threats and substantive threats, we try to teach our administrative teams what those differences are. Okay. And this is my final slide, and I think this is one that really speaks a lot to me, is every shooter that was interviewed and talked to, they didn't just come to school one day and just do these acts of violence. If you look at the bottom, it says grievance or disappointment. there was always a starting point for why a person went to that phase. And so the grievance or disappointment was usually a wrongdoing that this kid or somebody felt was happening to them. And if it wasn't dealt with, then it goes to the next step of now they start thinking about this all the time. And then they started to plan. And then they do some physical preparation. And then the last step is a violent attack. In every one of those places, schools, if they know what to look for, can short circuit that process. And what I would say is that schools naturally, because of relationships with the kids, and we have great teaching staff here in Norwalk, a lot of this stuff was short circuited already. I can't tell you probably how many things have been already prevented because of good relationships in your schools. So just, this is something that's really important the district can look at and understand is that, and I'll give one case example. Here in Paducah, Kentucky, there was one of the shooters I remember as a young administrator. The school had a newspaper that they allowed to kind of get out of hand, and it started some bullying that was just allowed to be published. And because of what was published there, this kid became a target for lots of bullying and other things that were going on. And then what ended up happening at the end is that the kid just got to the point where he was constantly being teased, he snapped. And so what I say is that culture is super important. And I can't overestimate it, that before you do anything else, those kids need to come into school and know that they have a trusting administrator, teacher, that they're loved when they walk through these doors. That cancels a lot of this out. But they do have tools. God forbid that any of this should happen, but I believe that your districts have been trained, and there's always a point where a prevention piece can happen. So you guys do positive behavior intervention supports, as a district. There's lots of good things that you're doing, but this is yet another piece to document if somebody threatens violence and how we try to prevent it. Now, normally this takes 6 to 8 hours to do, but do you have any questions that I can answer for you? Again, I'm from North Point, and Brad asked me to come in and speak just to give some information. We will be doing refresher courses for administrative teams to be there to help, but we have 26 districts that we service in 4 counties. We've already had 3 or 4 districts tell us they've used this process and that it's made a tremendous difference because they're looking into things like they never would have in the past. So it's all about prevention, and I think it's a good thing. So.
And the requirement is Main Street intermediate to high school level. So we initially started, so both Lonnie and Denny Dowdy were the presenters on this very session. So we started with Main Street admin, counselor, teachers, middle school and high school. We started here because of what we saw the value of this. We made sure all elementary schools, so everybody in Norwalk City School District has been trained. So some are fortunate to have Denny and Lonnie. Some went to Mansfield and had their training as well. So everybody in our district has been trained in this. And like I said, and Lonnie covered it, we are teacher-based, basically those pulled from the building crisis response team, counselor-based, and the principal and or assistant principal. So that's our teams currently. It has been used, and we are going to be using the very forms that you see within the book. We have kind of truckerized it, put our, our logo on it, but essentially those are forms that can be used statewide. No reason to change from that. So
and we did role playing too. So we had some scenarios where the teachers and staff went through different and then marked on the documentation sheets, and then we had one already completed so they can kind of see the flavor of how it works. And so we didn't just say, here's a book, go with it. We gave them some dry runs on it.
You see there's a test at the back, so they threw up for the training.
Yes.
Went through that too.
So there's a pre and a post, and so what they were asking was for certain keywords to make sure that we were doing our jobs as presenters. And then we get feedback then from the folks in Columbus to say, hey, we got a number of folks, that maybe didn't get something, make sure you revisit it. But we didn't get any of that, so I think we did pretty good.
And then we get a certificate after passing that, you upload it. So Mr. Baldwin's a part of that, uploading that document, say, here's who we have trained. So here are the people we're pulling from. And like I said, these are people ready at a moment's notice, not pulled from the classroom setting. So that's our.
And so the ESC system, there's 52 ESCs that cover all 88 counties. This happened all over the state of Ohio this past year. So this was a massive effort to try to get everybody trained. But I think we scoured the whole area of North Point. Huron County is all covered. So but more than willing to come back and assist in any way that you can. Any questions for board members? I know you get all kinds of information, but there's a lot of good stuff there, and more than willing to come back and do future presentations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, treasurer's reports.
Okay, so we'll start off with Happy Pride Day. All of us math people. March 14th, 3.145. So first we have our financial reports. There wasn't too much to February. It's a bit of a slow month for anything going on. We did receive a partial advance on our tax settlement. The rest of it came in March. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next month. We do have 2 sets of minutes to approve. We have the February 14th regular meeting. We have the special session on February 20th. Then we have a depository agreement. A little bit of information about this. We're required to have depository agreements with institutions that hold our public funds. The agreement can only be for a maximum of 5 years. So this is where we keep our active funds. It's what we use for our daily banking. As an aside, with all the bank failures in the news here in the last couple of days, all banks that hold public funds have to be collateralized. So this means they have specific collateral that's held for the amount of public funds that we have in them. So each month I receive a list from Civista, and it shows us exactly what the collateral is. Usually it's different CDs or treasuries or things. They can only be things that the district could invest in, which we're very limited by revised code for. So our depository can only invest in those same things for us because that's something that we needed to get from them. It would have to be something we're allowed to invest in. So, and it also has to be 102% of whatever our public deposit is, and that's for anything that's over the FIDC amount of $250,000. So this is also why banks aren't usually interested in holding deposits for public entities, because we have these collateral agreements by law. So it's expensive for them to be able to do this, whereas normally they only have to, they have the insurance up to the $250,000, and then as you see with the bank that just failed, they did step in and they're going to make everyone whole on that. At the federal level, not to take care of, but there's money that banks pay, so they're working at it. But just a little information about that since it's been in the news. We're not allowed by law to use credit unions. That was something that, we have a couple credit unions around here, and they had always wondered if that was something we can do. Of course, we can use them for our employees. We do direct deposit direct to credit unions, but we're not able to invest or even have them hold any of our money. The next part is our resolution accepting the rates. This is the second step of the budgetary process. Remember, you approved the tax budget in January that showed the need for our tax revenue. Now the Budget Commission assigned the rates for collection based upon our valuation. So once you approve the resolution, I send it back to the county auditor and it's done for the year. Our overall valuation increased from $383 million to $389 million. That's a change, of course, which is keeping us at the 20 mil floor. This is super important because it allows revenue growth instead of millage reduction as valuation increases. You'll see on the tax rates for next year that the millage amount for the bond retirement fund is down to 2.7 mils. This is the same as it was last year. It's gone down over the years for 3.35. We did have a debt refinancing quite a few years back, which also chopped off a whole year in our debt payments. So that's really good because it's not something that we pay as a school, it's something that our taxpayers pay. So the fact that it's down to 2.75 is a savings for our taxpayers. The tax rates also show a dollar increase around $220,000. That won't show up until this time next year. Taxes are due second Friday in February and August, so it splits over the fiscal years. 2024 is when Huron County is going to see the reappraisal, so that's next year. Every 3 years, we either have a reappraisal or an update. The reappraisal is where they actually come out and look at your property. They don't just, with the update, just kind of look at properties that are sold in the area. So they actually come out and look. You'll also notice the library fund levy is on there. We don't hold their money. That's just a legal requirement that it shows up on our tax rates. The deposit, we have a new CD under our certificate of deposits. I went out the full 5 years on this. The rate is actually 4.9%, which is just amazing when you look back not that long ago, we were at 0.3. So we're going to go start doing some more long-term rates on the CDs. You'll notice we don't have any in 2027 for maturities, and I like to keep my ladder. I wasn't going out real long because I was waiting for rates to continue to climb, and I do think they're going up. But once we get to 4.9 at 5 years, that's pretty good. Then we have our ESSER A requirement is they would like the board to approve when we do new uses and when our grant funds run out for federally funded employees, we're gonna start using the ESSER funds to pay for them for the rest of the school year. So that's on there for your approval. And then we have our resolution in opposition to House Bill 1.
He went to the council meeting.
Oh, okay, well, so it's confusing for sure. I'm sorry, he did not quite have all of the correct information. It's actually Representative Matthews that introduced this. And you might have seen in the headlines over the weekend paper that said, well, taxes go down. That really simplified the whole issue of House Bill 1. There's many moving parts to it. It's not just an income tax reduction. There's property tax shifts from the state to the property owners and taxing entities. So there's a lot of parts to it. It's very confusing. It's hard to really get into the weeds because there's so much to it. A little bit on the flat tax, which is part of it. They want to change from a progressive tax where you're taxed at a higher rate the more taxable income that you have, back down to a flat tax, which is what is known as a regressive tax. So in Ohio, if your taxable income is less than $26,050 taxable income, that's not your salary, you would pay no taxes. If you're between $26,000 and $44,000, this flat tax would get you a reduction of 0.54%. If you're between $44,000 and $88,000, it's a 14.8% reduction. If you're between $88,000 and $110,000, it's a 25.4% reduction. And if you're above $110,000, it's a 31.1% reduction. So you can see the reduction is much larger as taxable income goes up, which might sound like, okay, everybody should pay the same percent. But when you're making over $110,000, it's a lot easier to pay your taxes than when you're making $30,000, $40,000. So that's why it's important to have a progressive tax schedule so that that it doesn't impact their lives as much, pay a little bit more. And as a reminder, Social Security is never taxable at the state level for Ohio. So a retiree can be receiving Social Security and a pension. If the pension is under the $26,050, they're not benefiting at all from that income tax reduction. So that's really important. But they would see an increase in their property tax with the other part of House Bill 1, which is all these property tax changes. Currently, the state has plenty of money to fund income tax reduction, but the legislators are concerned about the future. You know, it's okay for now, but what's going to happen 4 years from now if things aren't quite as good as they are? So they're looking for ways to offset the loss of revenue from the flat tax, the 2.75%. The method in House Bill 1 is to eliminate the 10% rollback on the property tax for residential and agricultural property owners. Commercial and industrial don't have rollbacks, so they're not receiving this. But that would increase property taxes. So the proposal then is to also change the taxable valuation from 35% to 31.5%, which should have lowered property taxes, except then House Bill 920 comes into play, which is so confusing that the House Ways and Means Committee today at the hearing had to have testimony by the Legislative Service Commission to explain to them how House Bill 920 works. And also Article 12, Section 2A of the Ohio Constitution, which talks about uniform taxing rules. So I'm not going to go into all of this, but it is a huge tax increase and a reduction to not just school districts, but any taxing entity, right? Along with the reduction to the taxes, both the local governments and libraries receive a portion of the tax revenue. So they would receive less money directly, and then through the money that's appropriated to them, they would receive even less. So it's just bad for everybody. It's just a no-win-one. Basically, it comes down to different philosophies, which is what we hear when we listen to the testimony from Representative Matthews, which was like 2 weeks ago. On one side, proponents, the ones that are in favor of this bill, believe that lowering taxes will keep people in Ohio, bring other people into Ohio. On the other side are the people that believe that people come to Ohio and stay here for the services, which are good public schools, public libraries, good roads, beautiful parks with public access, safety services, and all those public amenities. So this really is a different philosophy on what you think people would come to Ohio for. And of course, we are all in favor of good public education, and that takes, it takes resources. And a lot of what we've seen, as Mr. Jeff mentioned, part of it was supposedly the state is supposed to make everyone whole from this, right? Well, if you remember tangible personal property, which was eliminated, that was millions of dollars that we lost over the years. So they say they make you whole, but then they forget about it a little bit later. And you see this too with the rollbacks. After 2013, and the new levy does not have rollbacks. It changed the homestead exemption. So it used to be anybody over 65 received a $25,000 reduction on homestead. Now it's only income eligible over 65. So they say they're going to keep you whole, but then later on, they don't. So that is why I would like you to approve the resolution in opposition to House Bill 1. And there's just so much more to know. I'm starting to glaze over, so I won't talk more about how it all works, but it really is when I say it's bad for everybody. And I do understand that there's going to be changes to this, right? Because they've discovered a lot of unintended consequences, because this is a huge increase on the property tax side, which I think they just thought was going to be a decrease in taxing entities. But I don't want to see this morph into something else that's just as bad for us, or even an income tax reduction when the school funding bill hasn't been fully funded. You know, we have this new funding formula, but it's not fully funded. Well, the state now has the money to fully fund it because they have so much in their rainy day fund. Instead of cutting income taxes, let's just fund schools. I mean, the funding program was great, but we were short like $1.5 million last year, or over $750,000 short on the funding formula this year. So it's nice we have a formula, but it's not really doing anything when it's not fully funded. So I would just ask the state to do that with their money, put it to good use. And finally, a donation from the Eagles that we use to purchase books for our students at League Elementary. And this was the Tony Logando, I believe, leadership book that the state received. So that was really cool. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Joyce. We have a motion for approval for treasurer's reports, items A1 through 8. So moved. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yeah, you should run for state rep. I'm serious. I feel like they don't know what they're doing down there, and you have, in my 8 years, you have taught me so much to understand a lot of this with the numbers, because it is confusing. So if anybody has questions about anything, Joyce is the person to talk to. She knows her stuff.
It is very confusing. I mean, like today they had the Legislative Service Commission about House Bill 920, and it's just fascinating to listen to all the history and why it happened and the consequences of it, and and all of that stuff. You can go to the Ohio Channel and watch that.
Joel looks excited. No, you're not excited. Hey, I got a smile on it. Okay. All right. A roll call, please.
Mrs. Crawford.
Yes.
Mr. Norris.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Ritz-Carlton.
Yes.
Mrs. Witt.
Yes.
Thank you.
Personnel, thank
Yes,
you.
personnel. We have 6 administrators. I'm asking for them to receive a 3-year administrative contract, which would extend the 25-26 school year. If you look at that list, those are committed truckers, have been here a long time, quality people, top to bottom. Some of those are building principals, athletic director, curriculum and tech, student services, and transportation director. So quality people, those 6 definitely deserve a 3-year contract. Number 2, employment, we have a substitute, Emily Senta. Number 3, we have a stipend for kindergarten screening, which will be coming up here shortly. The bulk of those are your Maplehurst teaching staff that'll be making that happen. Number 4 is employment of supplemental contract, Norwalk Middle School, Maria Goodsight, robotics advisor. Special contracts, we have Keith Moore, and Keith Moore is with us. He's going to be our middle school athletic director and football coach. So if you want to say a few things, I'll turn it over to you, Keith, and you can meet the school board.
Well, I want to first just thank each and every one of you for the opportunity. I had the awesome experience getting to meet our young men last week, and then we started in the weight room with them this week. And the first thing that came to my mind, being not from Norwalk, was we have great kids here. We really do. And I know I haven't gotten to meet all of them. I'm very excited about that opportunity to do that. I know as a young kid growing up in Foster, Ohio, I did not ever think that my road would lead me through Norwalk, Ohio, but I'm so thankful that it has. And I really truly am thankful to each and every one of you, gracious for this opportunity. And I hope that I make every one of you proud, not only on the field, but the things that we can also do with these young men in the classroom and through leadership development, which is something that I'm very passionate about. So again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Keith is a quality person. He actually, his school closed today, so he spent his entire day. So that tells you, like, want to get the jump start on this. He spent time with our kids, Mr. Slaughter, and then rolled right into the weight room with our kids. And so appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Continuation of Norwalk High School hires. So for baseball, Michael Smith, assistant coach. Softball, we have 2 listed there. Volunteer for track, we have Carson Ballman. So Mr. Ballman's son, as you know, he was a state performer. Not too many have gone through Norwalk because we haven't had the event to have pole vault, so he can help our kids out very in a specific sport area, and obviously he has ability to help in other areas as well. So adding him as a volunteer coach for Norwalk Middle School. That completes my personnel report.
Thank you. Motion for approval for personnel items A1 through 6.
So moved. Second.
I think Mr. Ritzenthaler and Mr. Moore. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Ritzenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford? Yes. Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes. Superintendent's reports.
Yes, A, we have items for approval, internet service provider contract with NOACA. That's an annual contract that we subscribe to, so we're needing to approve that, and that's a 5-year basis from 23 to 2028. Number 2 is our academic calendar. We've had a month now of public input. There has not been a lot of that. I think most, we've vetted that calendar well. Most are very happy and satisfied with what we have for the 23-24 school year. There is one shift, if you've seen, we moved our new teacher day. So that showed on Friday, and we moved that up Monday. And that was basically, so Mrs. Gerber, myself, central office, the building can have more time with those new hires so they can be in the building. So anyone who's a teacher knows, that's a rush time when you have new teacher day, you roll into all staff day for 2 days, and you have students coming in the next day. So that's just a smart move to back up that window. Those new hires will be paid for that day, and that's the only move that has been made within the calendar as presented to you from last month. 3, we're needing approval for 3rd grade assessments. This is a resolution authorizing the 3rd grade assessments to be conducted in paper format for the upcoming year in both English language arts and mathematics. So again, that's for the paper format. That's what we're voting on. Number 4 is updated board policies. There are 6 listed there. There originally was 7. There was a student records policy that Mrs. DuPont and I want to look at, and that'll probably be brought forward next month. So that's why the 6 exist. You had an opportunity to look at that language, very boilerplate, few vocabulary changes, date changes, and updates. If there's anything that you'd like to cover, I can, but those are pretty well standard fare. The attorney who writes these from Pepple Wagner, he'll be with our administrative team on Thursday as he's covering Title IX with our admin team. So that concludes my superintendent's reports.
All right, thank you. Need motion for approval for superintendent reports items A1 through 4. Second? Second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford? Yes. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Ritzenthaler?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes. Board discussion comments, eHobie News.
Yeah, I just have a couple things. First of all, on the attendance up there, at the beginning of March, they had about 585 applications. From what I understand today, they are up to 800, which I think is really, really good. And we still have 5 months to go. So I think that's really a positive increase. The other thing I passed out already to the board members, I've mentioned before, they have a new annual event, which is an eHobie Community Expo. I believe it's been in the papers, emails, I guess in the mailings. And they're going to have some workshops. In fact, I have a whole list of them where you can participate in them. They got stuff like chair massages that you can have, and you have hands-on on every one, which I think is really good. Free food. The hours is as this Sunday, the 19th, from 1 to 3. And then at 3:30, they're having a live jazz band over there. I have no idea what it's going to be like. I think it's a trio, but I'm anxious to go and see it. Not only that, but I've already told you how good the food is, so we're just for the food. You know, and like I said, I have a list here if anybody wants to see it afterwards. I have a whole thing of all the different shops that you can go to and have hands-on. And they're hoping for 400 people or more. So I think it'd be a good way to expose the OV. It's going to be an annual thing. And again, I passed one out to everybody. And I think the newspaper has a copy of it too.
And I think it's a good experience for the students.
Right.
Get a chance out for them as well. So,
Right.
thank you.
Let's see, I have a couple of extra ones here if anybody wants them.
In legislative report, we know a little bit.
And there's so much going on down there between all the funding and
The General Assembly mainly looking at the voucher, so universal voucher, the backpack bill, basically money tied to students' heads. I'm not concerned as much as others can be about that because I believe, as our district, we make our district the best place to be. So yes, you can take your money elsewhere. I very much am seeking Norwalk City School District to be the best place. So competition, fine, but I want people to understand this is a place to be academically, athletically, on the musical stage. So, but yeah, that's kind of active language that superintendents and treasurers getting with tied to those voucher plans.
And you brought the musical, so hopefully everybody was able to go out and support those kiddos because they did a fantastic job, which they
So good.
always do every year. And Robin does a wonderful job with her team. Okay, good.
I'll look to add to that too, because I attended on Saturday night. I thought that the changes that we have made already over there
Oh,
were really remarkable. I thought the sound system was great. I sent a text over to Brad that night. I had people in the orchestra pit come up to me and say it was so good to be able to hear people from the stage and to go with them. I mean, I can't say enough, and I'm looking forward to the future changes that we'll be making in that.
And then the note that April board meeting date change from April 11th to April 18th. Anybody else have any other discussion or comments? If not, motion for adjournment,
So moved.
second?
Second.
Give that one to Jeremy.
It's a tie.
And roll call.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Norris?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford? Yes. Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
All right, you get what you asked for. We asked to be healthy, so we have fruit and vegetables up here. So don't all run here quickly, but that's available to all here, so feel free to come on down.